Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is Saturday, our day to study the Pali Canon in English so that you can learn with the words of the Buddha what did he teach on all the various topics that relate to the path to enlightenment. We use this book series, The Words of the Buddha, where there's 13 volumes of books in order to study and learn in this program. We use volume 2 through 13 in this particular program, and they're available for free, accessible right on the internet, and some of them are even available in print copy if you would like to have a printed version. Or you can take the version that you download and go print it on your own. This week, we're in volume 12, which is titled Lowly Arts. This is the book where I've assembled various teachings related to the ordained practitioners and things that the Buddha was actually teaching to the ordained practitioners. But there's some teachings here that we can extrapolate into our practice as household practitioners. So that's why it's really helpful to be able to learn with this particular book and all the other books that are part of this book series. Next week, we're going to be starting in volume 13, which is titled Generosity. This is all about giving and sharing, and the Buddha talking about the benefits of giving and sharing. So we're going to be starting that one next week, and I'll give you guys the chapters for that before we finish in today's class. The way that we start each one of these classes is we start with meditation as a way to prepare the mind and help us kind of get ready to study the words of the Buddha, because it really helps to kind of clear the mind, and if there's anything kind of residual clutter or thoughts that are in the mind, by you actually doing some meditation prior to learning, it will help you to retain the teachings a bit more as you learn in classes like this. Or if you choose to sit down with a book and you're planning to read for 15-20 minutes, you could do a bit of meditation beforehand. Or you could even use this like if you know you're going to an important meeting at work, or you're about to have a really important conversation with your partner or your children or your boss. You could do a little bit of meditation beforehand to kind of clear the mind and calm the mind, preparing it for what you're about to embark on. Of course, in order to get to this enlightened mental state, there needs to be a consistent, ongoing practice of 2 to 3 meditation sessions per day of about 30 minutes or more per session. That should be kind of like a standard practice that everybody does on an ongoing basis in order to move the mind closer and closer to enlightenment. But then you can do these little kind of touch-ups where, before you get ready to read, or before you have an important meeting or important conversation, you might decide to do a little bit of meditation here and there. And that's what we do in this class, is do kind of like a 15-20 minute meditation just to kind of prepare the mind to learn the words of the Buddha and be able to retain them for a longer term basis. So I would like to just welcome you all to our class today and invite you to pull up a meditation cushion or a chair and get prepared for meditation. What you would like to do is make your lower body comfortable, and your hands and arms should be comfortable in your lap, either with your right hand over your left or just your palms on your lap or on your knees. Essentially, your lower body and the hands and arms should just be completely comfortable, relaxed, no muscles engaged whatsoever. The upper body, you should have it nice and erect. So erect the spine so that this will keep the mind attentive and alert during meditation. During meditation, the mind should be active, attentive, and alert because it's doing work. It's not time to zone out and completely just zone out and go to la la land during meditation. You should actually be doing real work to purposefully and actively train the mind during meditation. So even though our eyes are typically closed during meditation, we're not sleeping. We're not relaxing the mind. We're actually involved in training the mind. So keep the upper body erect so that this will engage the mind, keep it attentive and alert. Next, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Establish a nice, steady, consistent breath. Breathing in gradually through the nose and out through the nose. Your breath isn't going to necessarily be synced up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. You're doing the work here. So you establish a nice, steady, natural, consistent breath where you're experiencing the full breath on the inhale and experiencing the full breath on the exhale. I'm going to do some chanting just to kind of ease us into meditation a bit. If you know these chants, you're welcome to chant along. And then I'll be back with some more guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakava Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅgho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakhato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhammasati Satatawa Manusanang Bhuto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. Focus the mind on the breath. The breath is the present moment. The mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy when it's focused on the present moment. Breathing in and out. As the mind is focused on the breath, Wherever you notice that it's not on the breath, cut that off and let it go. Don't judge it. Don't try to evaluate it. Don't even try to figure out where it's coming from. But wherever you notice the mind is not on the breath, the present moment, cut it off, let it go, and come back to the breath. Breathing in and out. When the mind's not on the breath, no need to feel guilty or shameful. You haven't done anything wrong. That's just the unenlightened mind wandering. It has craving, desire, attachment. It doesn't want to stay in the present moment. So wherever you notice that it's not on the breath, the present moment, you cut it off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. I'm going to let you do this work now, focusing on the breath, letting go anytime the mind is not on the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. Just focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. สัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาควาพุทธังภาคะนังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาควตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมโหโนสัคขะโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรภูริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ Right, if you guys would like to make your way out of meditation. So today's class is going to be focused on the last part of this book, Lowly Arts, and it starts with chapter 40 all the way through the end of the book. If you haven't had access to this book yet, if you're just catching us for the first time in Zoom or in any of the social media sites like Facebook, YouTube, or any of the other places we're live streaming to, it's okay because we're going to be displaying these teachings on the screen for you so that you can follow along in the class. But then if you would like to join for future classes, you can download the books ahead of time and read all throughout the week the chapters that we're going to be studying next week. So there are some students who are joining that have been studying all this week the chapters in the book, and this class is really guided based on the questions that the students have based on their reading. So that's why we call this a study group, rather than me providing an actual discourse on these teachings. What I do instead is just have the students studying these chapters all throughout the week, and then they come to class like this in order to get help and get insight, get my thoughts on helping them to kind of process and understand the teachings, as well as how to apply them to their life. This particular chapters that we studied this week are starting off with some misunderstandings within the Buddhist community. And if you have taken the group learning program with me that is taught on Sunday and Wednesday, what you'll remember from this book, Volume 1, towards the end, there's a chapter titled Misunderstandings in the Buddhist Teachings. because there's a lot of misunderstandings due to impermanence of what the Buddha actually taught. Even within the Buddhist communities, you will see lots of things happening amongst Buddhist practitioners and even in Buddhist temples where they're doing things that have been kind of mixed and blended with folk traditions or Hinduism or other kind of traditions. And this part of this book, Lowly Arts, is helping you to see very clearly what are some of those misunderstandings. I detailed them in this book in volume 1 towards the very end of the book, but I didn't really give any references of where I got that material from and why I say those things are necessarily misunderstandings. I provided some information to help you understand why they're misunderstandings, but here in this book, Lowly Arts, there's, point by point helping you to see why certain aspects of things that are practiced in the world today aren't actually the Buddhist teachings. And this first one in chapter 40, which is the very first chapter that we're looking at in today's class, is actually talking about the misunderstandings related to Buddhist statues, because there's statues of the Buddha all over the place, all over the world, but the Buddha never actually taught to make images of him, because he knew that this was a craving, desire, attachment, and it would only lead to discontentedness. If people thought that these Buddha statues were actually him, then they would be worshiping these statues. They would be doing all kinds of things that aren't actually part of the path to enlightenment. So today, while there's amazing art of from the Buddhist communities all over the world, these Buddha statues and Buddha images that we see, they're not actually part of the Buddhist teachings at all. Depending on where you go amongst Buddhist communities, you'll see people that are bowing down to statues. You'll see people that are feeding statues, giving them water, giving them food. You'll see people that will tell you that the spirit of the Buddha is inside the statue. You will see people praying to the statue, asking for things. These are not the Buddhist teachings at all, and they actually don't lead to enlightenment. And in fact, it's just the opposite. If somebody is doing these things, it's actually going to take them away from the path to enlightenment, because the way that you attain enlightenment is by learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings in order to actively train the mind to eliminate the pollution of the mind, or the defilements, or the taints, the 10 fetters. And we do that through the path to enlightenment, or the Eightfold Path. Making Buddha statues, worshiping them, feeding them, thinking that the Buddhist spirit is inside of these statues, or praying to these statues, isn't part of the path to enlightenment. It doesn't mean that these people are wrong or they're bad, or we should look at them as negative way. We shouldn't judge people for doing these things. This is just what they've been exposed to as part of growing up in how they've been exposed to Buddhist teachings. But if you're really interested in learning the words of the Buddha and what he actually taught to truly make an effort to attain this mental state of enlightenment, then what you can learn through the words of the Buddha is that he didn't actually teach to have Buddha images or Buddha statues, because it's not part of the path. The path is all about learning, reflecting, and practicing the teachings. So you see that here in this first chapter, chapter 40. And the students may have questions on that by the time we actually get to it. Then there's another discourse here where it's helping you to understand other aspects of the Buddhist teachings as it relates to Maitreya Buddha, or the Buddha that is going to restore the Buddhist teachings so that all of humanity can attain enlightenment through the teachings of the Buddha. And here, this particular chapter 41 shares with you what the Buddha said related to this future Buddha, because there's lots of misinformation out there about Maitreya Buddha and what this Buddha is going to be doing and all these other things. So in this particular chapter, it helps you to understand that. Then the next chapter is about transferring merit. If you go to some places in the Buddhist community, even here in Thailand, many of them, after somebody has made donations of offerings to like me as a teacher or to the ordained practitioners or to the temple, they have this little urn of water that they will pour out as they're chanting. And if you ask people what they're doing, they will tell you that they're transferring the wholesome karma or the merit that they created by making this offering to their dead relatives. And if you look at the words of the Buddha, this is impossible. This isn't possible. This isn't the way that the natural law of karma works. You can't do something good and wholesome and transfer those benefits to somebody else. And this particular chapter goes point by point, helping you see what the Buddha actually taught related to the natural law of karma and merit. And it actually explains to you where this misunderstanding comes from. And it traces it back to particular people throughout history that have kind of misled the community to making them think that this is actually part of the teachings of the Buddha. And there's one in here about misunderstanding regarding holy water. In some places you go, there's ordained practitioners who will get a bowl of water, they will wrap string around it, they will burn a candle, drip the candle wax into the water, and they will chant as they're making this water, and they will call it holy water, or in Thai we call it namang. Naman. Namon. Namon is what the Thais, some people who aren't exposed to these teachings would maybe consider holy water or blessed water. And the belief is that if you spread this water around, it's somehow going to improve your life, either eliminating unwholesome karma or eradicating dark spirits or things like this. And this chapter goes through and helps you see that the Buddha himself said that he doesn't create holy water and he doesn't actually do this, and this isn't part of his teachings. And you can see it in his own words rather than relying on anything that I say or that anyone else says. You can see in this book about lowly arts where the Buddha says he doesn't do these kind of things. So when we see these things happening in the world, we don't look down on people, we don't judge them, we don't think they're bad people. It's just that they haven't had access and exposure to the Buddhist teachings in the way that maybe you have now that you're reading these books. So as you read through these first few chapters, you're going to see these misunderstandings and explaining to you things that are essentially happening in the world today related to the Buddhist teachings that are misunderstandings, but people keep holding on to them and keep doing them because they've been handed down from generation to generation. And at this point, they think that they're truly the teachings of the Buddha. Like this is another one, reciting the teachings. Like, for example, chanting. You go to some communities and they'll tell you, okay, here's these 3 verses of the Buddhist teachings, and if you chant this over and over and over again, eventually you will get to enlightenment. Well, here is the actual teaching to help you understand that that is a misunderstanding, and it's not actually true that the Buddha really taught that, because he didn't teach to do this verse of chanting and that's what's going to lead to enlightenment. What he taught is the reason why the mind is unenlightened is because of ignorance or unknowing of true reality, confusion, delusion. This is what keeps the mind trapped in the unenlightened state, and the thing that eradicates that is wisdom. So we have to actually learn, reflect, and practice his teachings in order to see the improvement to the condition of the mind. Just chanting isn't going to improve the condition of the mind and gain wisdom. You can't gain wisdom from just chanting. It's not something that we can do to eradicate the core central problem of why the mind is in the unenlightened state. So chanting doesn't produce wisdom, so therefore it's not an antidote, it's not a remedy, it's not a solution to the unenlightened mind. And there's some others in here as well, but I'll just kind of turn things over to all of you to see what questions you guys have about these chapters that we looked at this week, but I was just interested to kind of give you guys a little bit of an overview of why you're seeing these chapters titled Misunderstandings. And for anybody who is new to learning the Buddhist teachings, I really suggest that you look into this first volume, because there you're going to learn exactly what the teachings are. And then towards the end, when I explain the misunderstandings, then you'll understand why those are the misunderstandings. And by the time you make it to this program on Saturdays, the Pali Canon in English study group, you will be able to learn with volume 2 through volume 13 in the actual words of the Buddha. So you can see that everything that I'm sharing with you and the practice that you develop to improve the condition of the mind is based on the words of the Buddha. Because if you only based your teachings and your life practice on this oral tradition of people telling you orally what to do, then you haven't really based your practice in the words of the Buddha. So when you go back to the original source, the Pali Canon, then you can see very clearly what the Buddha did teach and what he didn't teach. And when you base your life practice and what you do on a daily basis in the words of the Buddha, then you know you're learning the truth. And as you learn that truth, you reflect on it and you practice it. And then when you're practicing, you see the improvement to the condition of the mind and the condition of your life. And that's how you would improve your life practice, is rather than just believing what people tell you, including me, rather than just believe what I say, instead base your learning, base your reflection, base your practice in the words of the Buddha, so you can see very clearly what he actually taught and what he didn't teach. And one of the challenges in doing this for any practitioner is that the words of the Buddha are kind of hidden a bit. You know, it's the Pali Canon that houses the largest, most complete collection of the Buddha's teachings. And that language is no longer a spoken language. So we can't just look at the Pali itself and understand it, but instead you come to resources like this book series where someone has translated, taken a lot of time to translate the words of the Buddha from Pali into English so that you can understand it. But even when you see those words printed in a book, you still don't believe them. Instead, you learn them, you reflect on them, and you practice to see if what's being shared in the books is actually the truth. And when you determine that it's the truth, then you have wisdom. And it's that wisdom that you have that eradicates the ignorance or unknowing of true reality that moves the mind closer and closer to this enlightened mental state. Belief won't do that for you. In just purely relying on the oral tradition of what one teacher says versus what another teacher says. Because all these modern day teachers, we can actually have conflicts. We can have disagreements about what the teachings are. But when you look at what the Buddha actually taught in his own words, then you can see the real truth, so that you know what you're reflecting on and what you're practicing is leading you to an improved condition of the mind. So let's see what questions you guys have. You can put your questions into the comment section of Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Our moderators, Manal and Basam, will see those. I think Manal is going to end up doing most of the talking today. And you'll be able to get your questions asked by putting your questions into the comment section. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and the moderators will be able to call on you, and you can ask any questions or follow-up questions you have directly. So I'll just turn the rest of the class over to you guys and allow you to ask any questions that you might have.
Yes, we have a question from Judith, chapter 46.
All right, 46. Sure, what's Judith's question?
She's going based off of the printed book on page 148. And the question is, how do we make amends with someone who is repeatedly exhibiting transgressive behavior? Is there a line?
Okay, so in this particular teaching, the Buddha, one of the Buddha's students, has essentially disrespected the Buddha in a significant way. And then he comes back to the Buddha and essentially apologizes to the Buddha. And the Buddha is like, essentially, no big deal. You've done the right thing. You've apologized. Now, kind of let's get on with it. Let's move forward. So that's what this particular teaching is about. But your question, Judith, is a really important one. But it's not necessarily 100% what is being shared here. What you're talking about is if you have a particular relationship, a friend, a coworker, a family member, associate, a neighbor, someone who's maybe aggressive or hostile or unwholesome, what do you do in these situations as a practitioner who's looking to move your mind to enlightenment? Well, for that, we can look at other teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha talks about cultivating wholesome friendships, wholesome associates, essentially. Because if you were around people who are always unwholesome, then your mind is going to have a tendency to move in that direction. And what I mean by unwholesome is not that we're judging somebody, not that we're putting ourselves above them or below them, but we know from the natural law of karma, things like if we killed or we steal or we have sexual misconduct or we lie or we take substances that cause heedlessness, for example, based on the 5 precepts, we know that this is going to cause harm in the world, so therefore harm is going to come to us. And if we associate with people like this, then there's a potential that conduct can kind of smear itself onto us. The Buddha talks about this in another simile that he has, where he talks about the snake who goes through feces. The snake might not bite you, but it'll smear you with the feces, and you'll have this smell. So if we spend time around people who kill, who steal, who have sexual misconduct, who lie, who take substances that cause heedlessness, we're going to have situations that come up that impact us. For example, let's say we have a friend of ours that's a drug dealer, someone who sells illicit drugs. And this person is pretty nice and friendly and polite and very kind, but their livelihood that they've chosen is harmful because they sell illicit drugs. Well, everything might be great in terms of the relationship, and they might be friendly, they might be kind, you guys might go out to dinner together, spend time together. But what happens when you guys are in a car together, the police pull you over, they might have some cocaine or heroin or methamphetamine, and they toss it under your seat when the police pull up. And now the police search your car, and here's this illicit drug under your seat. Who do you think's going to go to jail? You have no way of proving that those drugs are not yours. This is what the Buddha is talking about. When the snake goes through feces, it can smear you, right? The snake might not bite you, but it's smearing you. And the Buddha talks about cultivating wholesome relationships with people. So if you have people in your life that are harsh, aggressive, talk down to you, are otherwise controlling, putting their expectations on you, wanting you to be a certain way, there's no harm in you choosing to no longer associate with them. You should maintain your loving kindness. You should maintain your compassion. Loving kindness is active goodwill, having a genuine interest in seeing them be well and be peaceful. Compassion is concern for their misfortune. So you can choose to no longer have a relationship with this person and move on without putting a wall between you and them. Where if you were in a situation where you kind of shun them, or you put a wall between you and them, or you look down on them thinking they're a bad person, this is harmful for your practice, because your own mind is having aversion and it's judging them and it's putting them down, and you're having conceit to elevate yourself above them. But if you just observe certain things about somebody that you know are unwholesome, and you're like, if I continue down this path with this person, I'm going to get smeared. I'm going to essentially be affected by their unwholesome decisions. So I'm going to just make a choice to kind of distance myself and gradually move away from them. And this is completely fine. We think that in terms of a Buddha or the Buddhist teachings, that it means that you just need to completely absorb any kind of harshness or aggressiveness that's coming at you and just smile through it. Well, once your mind is enlightened, you can do that. But on this path, when you're encountering people who are aggressive or harsh or vindictive or controlling, there's no reason for you to maintain relationships with them. Even me, at this point in my practice, if there was somebody like that that was in my life, I just wouldn't spend time with them because it doesn't make sense for me to spend time. Now, if that person asked me to be their teacher and they asked for teachings of the Buddha, surely I would help them with teachings. But in terms of a personal relationship, there's just no reason to do that, because if they're being vindictive, harsh, controlling, aggressive, putting their expectations on me about what I should and shouldn't do, it's just not going to lead to anywhere wholesome. They need to do the work to improve the condition of their mind so that they can be more polite, more kind, more friendly, more respectful with others. But if in choosing to not associate with that person, you need to maintain your loving kindness, maintain your compassion, and just know that you're stepping away because it's good for your practice to have wholesome friends, wholesome companions, and wholesome comrades. These are the words of the Buddha.
And she also asks, when it's not criminal behavior, but some repeated transgression that reduces our health, what type of amends can we do?
You don't necessarily have to make amends with anybody. You don't have to repair relationships, right? So if somebody is aggressive or vindictive or controlling, or they've done harmful things to you or others around you, that person is doing those things because they're lacking wisdom, they're lacking moral conduct, and they're lacking mental discipline. They're lacking the understanding of that they're doing something that is harmful. And the reason why they're lacking that understanding, because they wouldn't do it if they knew that it was harmful. And if they were practicing with wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline, they wouldn't do it. So to sit down and try to convince this person that what they're doing is harmful is oftentimes impossible. If it's a close family member, if it's a life partner, if it's your child, if it's someone like this that you're living with on a day-to-day basis, sure, it makes sense for you to maybe help that person in a skillful way. But if it's just a friend, a companion, a comrade, a coworker, their behavior only affects them. But if you associate with them, then their decisions have the potential to affect you. So what you have to get good at is being comfortable with moving forward with your life without necessarily telling somebody else like that what they're doing is harmful. That they have to figure that out for themselves. That we shouldn't ever put ourselves in a position where we're having to go around and tell people, oh, what you're doing is unwholesome, therefore I can't be your friend anymore, and I need to stop being friends with you. I need to end our relationship. This isn't going to produce any beneficial results for you. Instead, where you see people using the words that you use, transgressions or doing harmful things, where you see that, just choose to move on. You don't need to make amends with that person. Instead, just choose to move forward with your life and don't involve unwholesomeness in your life, because it's going to end up affecting you in your life.
Nick has a few thoughts and a few questions on chapter 41.
Okay.
Some of the misunderstandings were hard reads for me. In chapter 41, it starts off with Metta Buddha prophecy, and it says lifespan of 80,000 years. Yet a chapter in the last book, the Metta Buddha prophecy, said he would come when there will come a time when the human lifespan is 10 years, and that's when he will arise. I've also seen elsewhere that Metta was to arise 2,500 years after Gotama Buddha's death. 483 BC, putting it at 2017. My question is, in the chapter, what is the misunderstanding, and what did the Buddha actually teach about the Buddha of the future?
Okay, part of the misunderstanding that you're experiencing, Nick, is your own misunderstanding. So let's deal with those first. The thing that you saw where the Buddha talked about the lifespan of 10 years, that, from my recollection, is the Buddha talking about the menstrual cycle of females. There's, well, let me back up for a second. Whenever we talk about prophecies, that someone is predicting something in the future, the way that they're explaining it and the way that they're talking about it is not going to be super crisp and super clear, because someone 2,500 years ago, even a fully perfectly enlightened Buddha, isn't going to be able to explain something 100% super clear about what's going to happen 2,500 years from now, because the insight and understanding that they have at that point in time is very difficult to understand and explain what's going to happen in 2,500 years based on their current understanding. Let me give you an example of this. One part that I've seen of the Buddha predicting the next arrival of the Buddha, the new Buddha, is he talks about the seas have to rescend to such a small degree that this new Buddha can step across the sea from the west to the east. And essentially, what this is describing is that the new Buddha is going to come from the west, but is going to reside in the east. And the sea or the ocean will have to deplete to such a degree that this new Buddha can actually step over the water in order to get to the east. Well, in 2,500 years ago, if this prophecy was correct, that they wouldn't be able to fathom airplanes, for example, that airplanes would be able to travel from the west to the east. In their view, in order for an individual to get from the west to the east, the seas would have to rescend to such a degree that they could literally step across and walked from the west to the east. So today, when we look at some of these prophecies, we can see that the clarity in which they're being explained isn't 100% crisp and clear, because 2,500 years ago, they couldn't have envisioned something like an airplane, for an example. So here, based on what I understand, where the Buddha is here saying in the time of the people with an 80,000 year lifespan, he's not talking about individual people that you can actually live for 80,000 years. What he's talking about here is that once Maitreya Buddha arises, from that point forward, all of humanity has another 80,000 years before the end of humanity. So humanity has an 80,000 year lifespan. That's based on what I know and what I understand. What you're thinking about there in terms of the 10-year or even the 5-year I've seen is the Buddha, not particularly here in this chapter, but in other writings that I've seen, there's people who say that the Buddha predicted that once females get to a point where they're having their menstruation at 5 to 10 years old, this is a time when the new Buddha is going to arise. And that's what we're seeing today, is we're seeing females as young as 5 to 10 years old are actually coming into their menstruation. And I would say the reason why that's occurring is because of the hormones that we're putting into animals, into cows, into pigs, into chickens, and now they've been ingested for so long that it's now sped up the maturity cycle of human beings. And this is why we see females that are menstruating as early as 5 years old now. And even my son, he's almost 9 years old. He has more hair on his legs now than I probably did when I was 14. and he's had that on his leg since he was about 6. So he no longer eats meat, but at one time he did. And my feeling on this is that the hormones that we put into our animals in order to produce faster growth because of greed or because of craving in the mind, people eating those animals is producing faster maturity in the body. So there's different conflicting views of what the Buddha actually said. One of the things that I look to in terms of this particular teaching that I have other sources for that I haven't put in this book yet, because I haven't completely gone through this book and actually put my explanations in here, but there's some other sources that are identifying what the Buddha said related to Maitreya Buddha. And one of the most crisp and clear things that the Buddha said about Maitreya Buddha is that Maitreya Buddha was going to arise 2,500 years after his death. And the Buddha goes through 5 5-year cycles, explaining these 5 5-year cycles. And he explains them in a lot of detail. He says the first 500 years, the people who learned his teachings, they're going to be really tight in their union. The community is going to be fairly close. There's lots of people who are going to be attaining enlightenment during this part, the first 500 years after his death. And when you look at the historical records, that's what we see. And then there's these other 4 500-year cycles. And he explains exactly what these 500-year cycles are. And if you look throughout history, and you look at those 4 500-year cycles, a total of 5, you can see how all of these things actually came to be. The last 500-year cycle just expired in the year 2017. In that last 500-year cycle, what the Buddha said is that his teachings would essentially be in such disarray and so misunderstood that ordained practitioners would be fighting other ordained practitioners. Household practitioners would be fighting and arguing with other household practitioners. Ordained practitioners and household practitioners would be in utter disrepair and disgruntled with each other, arguing about what his teachings are and what his teachings aren't. And we essentially are at that point now that if you've spent any amount of time on Facebook in Buddhism groups, you will see that people are just arguing and arguing and arguing about what the Buddha's teachings are and what they aren't. And we just ended that 500-year cycle in 2015 because the Buddha died in 483 BCE or BC. And if you add 2,500 years to 483, then you will see that exactly 2,500 years after his death is the year 2017. And you can see these cycles that he talked about. So that's when the Buddha Maitreya was expected to make his appearance. And anybody who understands anything about a Buddha is an appearance doesn't mean he's going to go on the news in 2015 and announce to everybody that he's the new Buddha, because a Buddha doesn't function that way. A Buddha isn't looking for fame, fortune, notoriety. In fact, these things can actually be detrimental to a Buddha's ultimate goal and objective. One of the most powerful things that a Buddha actually has is that nobody knows he's actually a Buddha. If everybody knew who the Buddha was, then people would be bowing down to him, they would be worshiping him, they would be on their best behavior whenever they're around him. And this would actually be detrimental to a Buddha's goal of helping people to attain enlightenment, if that's the way people conducted themselves around the new Buddha. One of the profound abilities that a Buddha has is they can observe a person's mind, and they can see where they're practicing the teachings well, and they can see where they're not practicing the teachings well. And a Buddha would be interested in helping a student to continue to practice well, and the areas that they're not practicing well, is helping them and encouraging them and motivating them and providing them teachings to help them improve their practice so that they can get to enlightenment. So if the Buddha went on the news and told everybody that he was a Buddha, first of all, nobody would believe him because they would think he just has ego. But second of all, if everybody knew he was the Buddha, then they would be on their best behavior when they're around him, and he wouldn't be able to diagnose their mind, observing the wholesome qualities and unwholesome qualities, and then giving them the remedies and things that they can do in order to improve the condition of the mind. So anybody who's going to be a Buddha today would need to meet the primary criteria of what a Buddha is and what a Buddha isn't. But you're not going to find that a true Buddha is going to go out and explain to everybody, I am the new Buddha, come worship me. Anybody who claims to be a Buddha, anybody who claims to be Jesus Christ, what they're essentially looking for is they're looking for you to admire them. They're looking for you to worship them and bow down to them. Well, anybody who's a Buddha, their wisdom is going to be profound. Their wisdom is going to be very deep about the teachings of the Buddha. Or they will be able to explain this path to enlightenment very clearly, very calmly, very wisely, and guide countless people to enlightenment. They don't need people to worship them. They don't need people to admire them. They don't need people to bow down to them. What a true Buddha is really interested in is guiding countless people to enlightenment. And they can actually do that better without anybody knowing who they are. So if you're ever in the presence of somebody who claims to be Maitreya Buddha, or even claims to be enlightened, you can safely consider that person isn't the Buddha and that person isn't enlightened. Because a true, real Buddha, a true, real enlightened being, isn't going to have a desire. They're not even going to have a need for other people to know that they're a Buddha or know that they're enlightened, because you can actually help people more with nobody knowing that you're a Buddha. So hopefully that helps you a bit, Nick. If there's any other questions on this topic, you're welcome to ask any follow-up questions to understand more about Maitreya Buddha.
No, that answers it. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We have another question from Amina on chapter 48.
Chapter 48, okay.
Can we review the first paragraph to understand the full meaning of making amends according to the Dhamma with an example for our life practice?
Okay, so let's see this first paragraph. And I haven't gone through this book as thoroughly as I have some of the others, so I haven't really kind of tightened up the language a bit, but let's just see what it says. As I was, in that I, for the sake of the throne, deprived my father. Wrongdoing overcame me, fortunate one, foolish, having done wrong and wicked as I was. In that I, for the sake of the throne, deprived my father, that good man and just king, of his life. May the perfectly enlightened one accept my confession of my evil, unwholesome deed, that I may restrain myself in the future. I'll continue on, but just as a summary, if I remember correctly, this is a teaching of a prince who ended up killing his father in order to become the king. And he's basically admitting to the Buddha that, yeah, even though I'm a king right now, the way that I became the king is I killed my father. And he's admitting that. Those first words were from the king admitting to the Buddha that he killed his father. And then the next paragraph is, indeed, sir, wrongdoing, this is the Buddha speaking, indeed, sir, wrongdoing overcame you when you deprived your father, that good man and just king, of his life. But since you have acknowledged the wrongdoing and confessed it as is right, we will accept it. For he who acknowledges his transgressions as such and confesses it for the betterment in the future, will grow in the noble discipline. So essentially what the Buddha is talking about here is that if you do something wrong, or unwholesome, the way that I tend to like to use the word, admitting that to yourself, admitting that you've done wrong and you've done harm, and then actively working to improve. That's what the Buddha is saying here, is this person will grow on this path to enlightenment. In this noble discipline is on this path to enlightenment. You have to be willing and able to look inwardly, objectively observe things that you've done that have caused harm, and then aim to improve those. So if you've done harm in the past, which I'm sure we all have, there's no perfect being that hasn't caused harm at some point in this life. If we look back and we look at the harms that we've done, we don't need to beat ourselves up about that. We don't need to feel guilty or shameful, even though we might. But you can let that go because it's in the past, and just learn from those situations. Learn from the things that you've done that have caused harm. Learn from the unwholesome things, and then aim to improve so that you no longer do those. If the people that you've done harm to are still in your life and you feel that you need to apologize to them, then go ahead and do that. You can do that, and maybe even give them a little gift as part of your apology. But if these are situations that are long in the past, a few years ago, 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and those people are no longer part of your life, you don't have to go seek these people out and find them just to apologize to them. This is one of the reasons why in the loving kindness meditation, I will sometimes include one of the rings. Anyone who I've caused harm to, may they be peaceful, right? Because there's people that I caused harm to when I was 4 years old. One of the earliest memories I remember is in my birthday party when I was 4 years old. There was this big group of kids who brought me lots of gifts, and there was this one child that showed up that didn't have a gift, and I admonished him and I talked bad to him because he didn't bring me a gift for my birthday. I was 4 years old, right? I didn't really have the wisdom to understand that that was wrong. I was just interested in craving desire attachment. At a 4-year-old, I was craving those pleasant feelings. So when this person showed up and didn't have a gift, I talked bad to him, and it kind of changed the whole course of the whole birthday party. But nonetheless, that's somebody that I caused harm to when I was 4 years old. But it's impossible for me to go back and apologize to that person. The best thing I can do is acknowledge it, know that it was wrong, let it go, put it in the past, and then just have a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well and be peaceful. So that's the way you let go of things in the past, is just train your mind to observe the things that you've caused harm, aim to do better, always work to do better and improve your practice, but let go of anything from the past, but let it go with the wisdom that you're working to improve those things.
Ali has a question. Is noble disciple mean on the path to enlightenment? What exactly is the noble discipline?
There's a noble disciple, and then there's the noble discipline. In the lifetime of the Buddha, there were the royal family, and then there were Brahmin or ascetics, kind of priests, kind of like noble, or they were holy people. But the noble people during the lifetime of the Buddha were kind of like the rich, the affluent, kind of like the royal family. But then there was all these lower class people who were like commoners, who were kind of barely scraping by. We would call it living paycheck to paycheck. Well, what had transpired during many generations is the lower caste people felt like they were so low that they couldn't pray, for example, because during that lifetime there was a lot of prayer and worship going on. They felt that they had to go to the Brahmin in order to pay money so that these holy people could pray on their behalf, and that they were kind of destined to this miserable life as a low caste poor person. So what the Buddha was doing in his teachings is he was kind of transforming people's minds and helping them see that this noble class, being a noble person, isn't based on how much money you have in the bank. It's not based on your clothing. It's not based on what family you were born into. But being noble is all about being wise and having wisdom, having good, wholesome moral conduct, and having mental discipline. So even someone who was born into a low family that was poor, the way the Buddha cast this to help them transform their mind is that you can still be noble. Even though in that society they looked at noble people as being like royal family or rich or well-off people, the Buddha is saying you can be noble by gaining this wisdom, by practicing moral conduct, and by having mental discipline. So the noble discipline is his teachings. The path to enlightenment is the noble discipline. A noble disciple, you'll see that sometimes too. This is somebody who's learning very closely with the Buddha, someone who's essentially in the jhanas or the first stage of enlightenment, someone who's studied really well, not someone who's complacent and lazy and just kind of lackluster about their practice, but someone who's really dedicated, someone who's determined, someone who's diligent, someone who's really progressed in their practice, meditating regularly, has lots of wisdom, is really seeing the results of this path. That's a noble disciple. And a noble disciple would need to know and understand the noble discipline. The noble discipline are the training guidelines. The path to enlightenment, what I refer to as the path to enlightenment, would be the noble discipline. What we might call a close student or a diligent student is a noble disciple.
Teacher David, I thought we could briefly review the last section of chapter 48.
Okay. Let's see, we're on 48 now. Okay. Which section that would you like to look at?
Just the lay flower, mention of the lay flower.
Okay.
I wasn't sure why that was given significance in this translation.
Can you point me to where you're talking about so I can find it here?
The 5 qualities of the lay flower, of Khandala, the lay flower.
Okay, so if I search for lay flower, let me see if that works. Lay flower. Nope. Let's see, flower. Here we go. Is it titled a brilliant of a household practitioner?
For householders.
Okay. All right. So this is the one, right? The one that we're looking at now?
Yes.
Okay. So let's read through this. This is essentially the Buddha talking about kind of like the ideal household practitioner. Like, how would they be practicing? What are the 5 things, the 5 qualities that would make an ideal, superb, kind of cream of the crop household practitioner? This is titled A Brilliant of a Household Practitioner. Monks, possessing 5 qualities, a household practitioner is a brilliant household practitioner, a gem of a household practitioner, a fine flower of a household practitioner. What 5? He is endowed with confidence. This is confidence in the Buddha, that he is enlightened, right? This is confidence in his teachings. This is confidence in the community of practitioners. Because if you don't have confidence that the Buddha is enlightened, why would you ever learn his teachings? If you don't have confidence in the teachings themselves, why would you ever learn them? So as you're learning and practicing these teachings, when you first started, you might not have had confidence. You might have had doubt. But as you learn them, as you see more and more truth in them, as you see them producing benefits and results in your own mind and in your own life, your confidence improves. So someone who studies diligently and studies deeply and practices really well, their confidence in the Buddha is only going to increase. The confidence in the teachings themselves is only going to increase. And the confidence in his community of practitioners is only going to increase because they see that these teachings are actually improving the condition of their mind. So that's why he's saying this one is first, that in order to be a gem of a household practitioner, they would need to have confidence, and that's confidence in the Buddha, his teachings, and the community. The second one is he is virtuous. This means practicing moral conduct. Someone who is practicing right speech, for example, right action, and right livelihood. This makes up the moral conduct of the Buddhist teaching. So if somebody is virtuous, they're going to be speaking at the right time. What they say is true. They speak gentle. They speak beneficially with a mind of loving kindness. They're not going to be blameful. They're going to be speaking blamelessly. Those are the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. So if some household practitioner is virtuous as it comes to speech, then you're going to see these qualities in their speech. And likewise with action, with right action, the Buddha talks about that killing other beings is harmful, and if we do that, it's going to be harmful to us. If we steal, if we have sexual misconduct, so forth and so on, then someone who is virtuous wouldn't be doing those things. So they would be practicing moral conduct. And then the Buddha also talks about right livelihood, and he gives 5 livelihoods that he says if we were doing any of these livelihoods, these are wrong livelihoods that are going to cause harm in the world. And those livelihoods are things like selling weapons, selling substances that cause heedlessness, selling living beings, selling meat, and selling poisons. If we do these things, they're causing harm in the world, so therefore harm is going to come to us. So if a household practitioner isn't doing these things, then they would be virtuous. They would be practicing moral conduct. So he's saying, this would be a gem of a household practitioner. The third one is he is not superstitious. He does not believe in auspicious signs, and he understands Gama, essentially, the natural law of Gama. So if we believe in fortune telling, or we believe that the stars are aligned, and this means that we're going to be angry today because the stars are misaligned, or the stars are aligned, so therefore it's a good time to make business decisions, and I had lightning strike near me, so that's an auspicious sign. Or I was walking down the street and I saw the feather of a bird in front of me, so that means something. Or I saw this butterfly today and that means something. So if somebody's very superstitious, then they're not seeing true reality. Their mind is diluted. Their mind is confused. Their mind has that ignorance or unknowing of true reality. So if somebody understands the natural law of Gama, of cause and effect, action and result, essentially the results of our decisions, by us making wholesome decisions, there's going to be wholesome results. There's always this cause and effect. Why is there a feather in front of my path on my way up this mountain? Well, that's because there was a bird that flew and dropped its feather. The feather came out of the bird, and I'm in the woods, and there's a feather there. It's not some auspicious sign. So if somebody understands the natural law of Gama very, very closely, as the Buddha explains in all of his teachings, they're all pointing to the natural law of Gama in one way or another, then the Buddha is saying this person is a gem, that they are a fine flower, a very ideal household practitioner. Number 4, he does not seek outside of here for a person worthy of offerings. So remember that during the lifetime of the Buddha, there was the Buddha and his community, but then there were other teachers around that claimed that their teachings are the ones who had attained enlightenment, and it was their teachings that ultimately produced enlightenment. the Buddha knew that wasn't true. The Buddha knew that those other teachings weren't leading to enlightenment because he could see very clearly hanging yourself upside down from trees isn't going to produce enlightenment. Or piercing the skin with metal probes or wooden bamboo shafts isn't going to produce enlightenment. Or starving yourself to the brink of death isn't going to produce enlightenment. He knew those things, and he saw other people doing them, so he knew that those things don't lead to enlightenment. So this fourth one is he's sharing, if somebody is looking to make offerings of money or time or energy or food or clothing or shelter or medical supplies, then they would seek to make those offerings to his community, because those household practitioners would know that it's his teachings that are leading to enlightenment, not these other teachers. So if people are making offerings to these other teachers in these other communities, then their mind is still very polluted and they're not understanding what it takes to lead to enlightenment. So if somebody's looking to make offerings to these other teachers outside of his group, then they're not yet what the Buddha is calling a fine flower, or this ideal household practitioner, because they're not yet fully understanding how significant and how important his teachings are. So he says here in number 4, he does not seek outside of here for a person worthy of offerings. So a household practitioner would know that the Buddha and all of his students are the ones that we should be making offerings to, because they're the ones who are worthy. They're the ones who are truly practicing the path to enlightenment, not these other folks. And then number 5, he first does meritorious deeds here, meaning here in his community. So merit, once again, is making offerings, and that number 4 talks about offerings, but you can also make merit through your actions or through your deeds. So, there's a whole litany of things that you can do aside from just making an offering to produce merit. For example, Bossum, he is reading the books that I write, and he's helping to proofread them. In that situation, he's not giving me any money or any clothing or any food. He's just performing a deed that is going to produce merit. And Miranda and Randall, they're looking up references for these books. In that particular situation, they're not making an offering, they're performing a certain deed. Well, in order to support any teacher that's sharing these teachings, there needs to be certain offerings of food and water and shelter and clothing and medical supplies. And today we tend to offer money and allow the teacher to find those things for themselves. But in a place like here in Thailand, if you're physically in the presence of your teacher, you can take them out to eat. Some of the students here will sometimes take me out to eat. They will invite me to go to lunch, and they will buy me lunch, or they will bring me supplies, or they will offer certain tangible goods. But there's also certain deeds that we can do to produce merit as well. And producing merit as deeds in the community of people that their teachings are actually leading to enlightenment, then that makes those teachings available for more and more people. If somebody's mind is defiled and polluted, and they don't realize hanging themselves upside down from trees isn't producing enlightenment, and they're supporting those teachings, then essentially those teachings are going to continue to prosper in the world, because more and more people's minds are deluded, and they think hanging themselves upside down from trees is going to produce enlightenment. But a real gem of a household practitioner is one who acknowledges and sees the teachings of the Buddha as being profound, as being important, as being significant. And by people supporting that teacher, then those teachings are what continue in the world. And by doing these offerings like number 4 and making these meritorious deeds, then by you identifying, yes, this teacher's teachings are helping me to learn, helping me to gain wisdom, helping me to improve the condition of the mind, helping me to improve my life. So therefore, let me support this teacher, because that means I'm going to be able to continue to receive teachings from this person, but also other people in the world are going to be able to receive teachings from this person too. So the Buddha is saying here that a real gem, a fine flower of a household practitioner, would essentially recognize his teachings are so helpful and so significantly improving people's mind and their life that they would look to perform meritorious deeds within his community and not outside of it. And then, just like the Buddha typically does, he's kind of summarizing or kind of closing up his teaching with just restating what he says at the beginning, which is, possessing these 5 qualities, a household practitioner is a brilliant household practitioner, a gem of a household practitioner, a fine flower of a household practitioner. So these are the 5 things in this particular teaching that the Buddha is referring to as a fine household practitioner. But you'll see other teachings where he talks about other qualities. So what's important to understand when you're reading the Buddha's teachings and you're studying them is he doesn't just give you one teaching that says everything. He has these different layers. So you might see this discourse where he lists these 5 things, and he says, this is what makes a wonderful household practitioner. But you might see another teaching where he says, here's 5 more things, or here's 6 things, or here's 4 things that makes a wonderful household practitioner. So don't take this as an all-inclusive list and that this is exclusively what makes a fine household practitioner. This is certainly a great list, but you're going to see other teachings from the Buddha where he'll add to this and he'll put additional things in there. So he kind of layers his teachings, and when you pull these back layer by layer, you might end up with 10, 15, 20 things that he shares that are making a really fine, high quality household practitioner.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. There are no more questions today.
Okay, so I'll just end class and by sharing with you guys what we are going to be studying in our next class. Let me pull that up. We're on the last book of this program, which is volume 13, titled Generosity. And what we've identified there is that for next week, we'll study chapters 1 through 44. And then the following week, it will be chapters 45 through 88, which is just the entire book. And while that may sound like a lot, it's really only about an hour's worth of reading. Once we get to the restart of this program, which is going to be starting on August 7th, we're going to be starting off in volume 2, which is this book, Walking the Path with the Buddha. And we're only going to be doing 10 chapters a week. And the reason why is because what we're going to be doing in this new restart of the program is not only are you going to be studying the words of the Buddha in these books, but now what I've got available is underneath of each of these discourses from the Buddha is you've got a line and then you've got my words underneath of it explaining what the Buddha is teaching. So you'll have a chapter like this of chapter 14, which has literally about 3 or 4 sentences from the Buddha. And then you've got 5 paragraphs of me explaining those 3 or 4 sentences. So as we progress in our classes starting on August 7th, we'll only cover 10 chapters a week because there's a bit more context, more commentary from me that will help you to understand this. So if you've gone through this program once, then so far what you've had is you've just had the words of the Buddha. But when you restart this program on August 7th, you'll have the words of the Buddha and you'll have my words as well to help you further understand what the Buddha is teaching, so that when we get into these classes, what we'll be able to focus on is kind of really applying the teachings to your life, because you're going to have more words from me that you'll be able to sit with and read and reflect on and practice throughout the week. So I am looking to restart this on the 7th of August, which is essentially 3 weeks from today. But before we do that, we're going to finish out with this book of generosity, volume 13, chapters 1 through 44, and then the following week, chapter 45 through 88. And if you need access to any of these books, you can go to buddhadailywisdom.com, and from there, there's a button up in the upper right corner that says free books. And if you click on that, you'll see the whole library of all the books that I share as it relates to the Buddhist teachings, and you can download these. So far, I have volume 2 and volume 3 with my explanations. I'm continuing to work on all the other volumes. It took me about 4 or 5 months just to get all of these books into a format and updated the translations. So it took me about 4 or 5 months just to get them into the book form and updated each of the teachings with translations that I feel are better suited for people to learn and practice the Buddhist teachings. And now, week by week, I'm working on each individual chapter to put my explanations under each chapter, and that's what Basam's helping me with. And probably in like another week or so, we will be done with volume 4. And while I have volumes 4 through 13 on the website, they don't actually have my explanations in there yet. It's only volumes 2 and 3 that have my explanations in there. But as we progress in this program, you will have those explanations long before you get to the actual book. So the explanations that I've done so far up to volume 3 will take us all the way to the end of November. And here in a matter of a week or so, I will have volume 4 done, which will take us to the end of December. So I'm kind of like 5 or 6 months ahead in preparing these explanations in the books so that before we actually get to the book itself, I will have already finished the explanations. So this will really help us, I feel, in this program, that rather than spending a lot of time trying to figure out what does this word mean or what does that word mean, or what did the Buddha mean here, and you're trying to decipher some of the language, instead of that, you're going to have updated translations that are going to be more clear and more crisp for you, that you're going to understand a lot more, and you're going to have my explanations underneath of it. So it should make your individual study, your personal study, more seamless, more effortless. It should be more conducive to you sitting down with this book, spending 10, 15, 20 minutes a day looking through the chapters and actually absorbing the material, so that when we get into these classes, you'll actually probably have questions about, okay, David, I understand what you're sharing here, but how do I apply this to my life? Or you might ask me to go beyond what I've actually written in the book, and maybe there are some things that you're still not understanding, even though my explanations are in there. You might raise to my attention that you're still not understanding something, and that will be really helpful to know. So as we progress, starting August 7th, we'll be starting over at the very beginning, and you're going to have a lot better translations available to you, and you're going to have explanations. If you prefer printed copies of these books, so far I've got them in PDF, but as I'm putting my explanations in them, I'm uploading them to Amazon so that you can get a printed copy. So if you prefer a printed copy, Volume 2 and Volume 3 are available on Amazon, and you can get the printed copies to help you in this program if you prefer the physical book. If you live in a place where Amazon isn't available, then you can take that PDF and you can print it, because I don't have these books copyrighted. I'm not interested in holding on to these teachings. I'm interested in sharing them with as many people as possible. I'm not interested in profiting off anything that I do. I'm only interested in sharing these teachings with as many people that are interested to learn them. So if you would like to take any of these books and photocopy them or print them or share them with people around you, you're more than welcome to do that. You don't have to ask for my permission. In fact, right at the beginning of all of these books, I have a blurb in there where I share with you that you're welcome to freely distribute these books to anybody that you'd like. There's no need to ask for my permission for that. So if you'd like a printed version, you'll find these showing up on Amazon as we progress month by month. I'll be uploading these there. You can get a printed copy there, or you can just print them yourself. Totally up to you how you would like to do that. So thank you all for joining today's class. In our future classes, which tomorrow we'll have one for the group learning program, we're in chapter 20 of volume 1, Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. We're in chapter 20 there, and that's all about moving the mind from this animal consciousness to this human consciousness, and helping you see how to do that, and helping you see how the unenlightened mind is largely functioning through animal instincts. And we're soon going to be restarting the group learning program as well. In about another 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to be restarting that program from the beginning. And once again, you can download this book, Volume 1, from the same location. You can print it from there if you like, or if you would like to get this book on Amazon, they have that on Amazon as well, and you can download it from there. So we're going to be moving into a period of restarting all of our programs. So if you're just joining us for the first time, or you're relatively new, this is a great time to join, because we're getting ready to restart all of these programs, and you can start from the beginning, and you can get walked through how the Buddhist path to enlightenment unfolds layer by layer, little by little, and you can improve your life practice and develop this life practice to move your mind to enlightenment. Because on Saturdays we do this Pali Canon and English study group, but on Sundays we do the group learning program, and then on Wednesdays we also do the group learning program where we tend to focus on breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, and sometimes we teach chanting as well. So between all 3 of these days, Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday, you can meet right here and you can learn the Buddhist teachings, and then you can go off and practice them and see the truth for yourself. If you miss one of these classes for any reason, which you're going to do that because of impermanence, you're not going to be able to make every class, they're recorded in YouTube, they're recorded in Facebook, and they're recorded on our podcast. So you can listen to the replay and you can catch up on any of the classes that you've missed. So thank you all for deciding to learn and practice the Buddhist teachings. As you have any questions, feel free to reach out in these online classes. Feel free to post something in Facebook. I'll help you there. You're welcome to send a private message or contact me through the scheduling app to schedule a personal guidance where we can talk one-on-one, and I can help you with any challenges that you're facing along this path. So until a future class, have a lovely rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee khap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.